Hey everybody, it's Chainsaw. Welcome to the Chainsaw Reacts podcast, a podcast I will be uploading every Saturday discussing movie news, movies, TV shows, video games. Anything I'm interested in will be discussed at some point on this podcast. As you can tell by the title of this podcast, there is a few things I'm going to be discussing within this podcast. If there's a certain topic that interests you more than the others, check the description. There is a list of the topics I'll be discussing along with what time that topic is started on this podcast. You can skip to a certain topic if you want to, or if not, you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the entire podcast. Throughout my topics, I usually throw out a couple suggestions and ideas, and hopefully to hear you guys' feedback on those things and to see what you guys think about all of this stuff I'll be discussing within my podcast as well. So let's see what you guys think with all this stuff I'll be discussing throughout all of this. So anyways, let's jump into the topics I'll be discussing today, which is Wolverine 3 rumors with the casting. Also be discussing the X-Men Apocalypse casting of Storm, Jean Grey, Cyclops, and even Apocalypse himself. And I'll end off with this podcast talking a little bit about what I would like to see in the future of the X-Men universe, the X-Men world, if you will. So let's jump into Wolverine 3. So, Patrick Stewart, of course, as we all know, is Professor X for the longest time. The very beginning of the X-Men world started out, has recently said in an interview that he will be returning as Professor X in Wolverine 3, basically teaming up with Wolverine. Now, I thought this was very interesting, and I thought that, wow, he just throwing that out there like nothing. He just basically said openly, yeah, I'm going to be in Wolverine 3. This is huge news to people that really love the X-Men universe, and I really love the X-Men universe. I grew up with X-Men 1, 2, and 3. I know people didn't like X-Men Origins Wolverine, and I understand there's issues, and I will admit there are issues with that film. I still like it in the sense of that it's the first time I get to see Wolverine not with the X-Men, but I understand the flaws, and it had a lot of issues, but it is what it is. X-Men First Class I thought was okay. I wasn't really a huge fan of it because it was a new cast and I'm so attached to the original cast. I have not seen the Wolverine. I don't know why I have not seen it. I just not got around to see it, and I'll be jumping on that as soon as I possibly can. And X-Men Days of Future Past, in my personal opinion, was one of the best films of 2014 by far. It was just one of the greatest films we have seen. We've seen from the X-Men universe. And so, to the extent of Patrick Stewart being in Wolverine 3, I think this is a fantastic idea. And even when they asked Hugh Jackman, after Patrick Stewart made all those statements about him coming into Wolverine 3, Hugh Jackman did not deny that this was happening. He basically said, that sounds like a very good idea. It sounds like it would work. I mean, that relationship is very key at the very beginning of the X-Men universe and was very important in X-Men Days of Future Past. And so this would be interesting to see where that goes after all of the experiences they've had, and especially with X-Men Days of Future Past, what lies in store for Wolverine after all of this, and basically how that relationship is going to be between him and Patrick Stewart's Professor X. Now, the thing I wondered, and I'm curious to know what you guys think if you have an opinion on this, is what exactly would the film be about if they teamed up with Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and Professor X in Wolverine 3? What would the story be about? The only thing that I can think of that would be really, really cool to introduce a new villain into this, and basically having Professor X be there to be not necessarily a helping with the fighting, within the film, but helping as guidance and basically explaining to Wolverine the timeline that's happened since he came back into the present after he fixed everything in X-Men Days of Future Past, so he could be a key part there and helping him out there. But I think that Wolverine 3 should introduce Omega Red. I think that would be a fantastic thing to do, because that villain, to me, is one of those X-Men villains that really needs, in my personal opinion, a film treatment to where the people gets introduced to this villain, and he is menacing, he is scary, and I think that it'd be a really good idea to introduce Omega Red in Wolverine 3 and having Patrick Stewart be there to be that helping force with helping Wolverine by guidance, because maybe Wolverine can't defeat him. He loses a battle, and Professor X is there to help him and to basically guide him to basically control himself and able to defeat Omega Red. I think that'd be a really cool thing, but who knows what way they're going to go. But I think with what statements was said about Hugh Jackman not denying it and Patrick Stewart saying that, yeah, I'm going to be returning again, I think that it's a good idea, and I'm hoping that it is the truth because ever since X-Men: Days of Future Past, they brought the whole entire most of the cast, not the whole entire. I mean, Rogue had a cameo, and they finally brought back Jean Grey and Cyclops from the dead, but the majority of cast and even introducing new cast with Bishop and you Blink and the rest of them. I mean, that was very cool. So I'm hoping that the future element of the X-Men Days of Future Past brings out more X-Men films, and I'll be discussing that a little bit later with what I would like to see with all that. Anyways, let's get into X-Men Apocalypse. Now, of course, this is old news, but this is something I actually want to discuss, and hopefully we'll get to see within X-Men Apocalypse, because even within that same interview that Patrick Stewart gave about returning as Professor X in Wolverine 3, he also mentioned about X-Men Apocalypse that Ian McKellen is going to be returning as old Magneto. There's a lot of speculation about how that's going to happen, and basically, really, why is it needed? Why is it only him? I have no real theory about why this would happen, but who knows? Who knows exactly what's going to happen within that? But X-Men Days of Future Past introduced time travel, introduced a way to send someone into the past. So maybe there's a way to where he basically meets his older self, or the older self meets the younger self, and it doesn't really change the timeline. I'm not really sure how that would work, but we saw that in X-Men Days of Future Past where young Professor X met the old Professor X in a way through Wolverine's mind, but who knows exactly what's going to happen with that. But if that's the case, I hope that Ian McKellen's part is not shoehorned just to have an older cast member in there, but to have him there for a purpose. I think that is the key thing, to have him in there for a particular reason, so it doesn't feel like you're forcing it because the fans want it. I mean, really, the fans want more original cast. I think that's what they want. They want the original cast involved in these films. Now I want to go on to the actual casting of Cyclops, young Jean Grey, and young Storm. Now I'll be honest with you guys. I'll be upfront and honest. X-Men First Class, I thought it was okay. I wasn't really a huge fan of it because I'm so attached to the older cast. I'm so attached to the original cast. And when X-Men Days of Future Past came out, I saw it in the theaters, and I did not see X-Men First Class before I saw X-Men Days of Future Past. I saw X-Men First Class after Days of Future Past. And so really, a lot of the younger cast I was introduced to for the first time in X-Men Days of Future Past. But for me, what really made X-Men Days of Future Past special was the original cast returning. The future scenes is is something I really loved, was seeing the original cast return again. Now into X-Men Apocalypse. As I mentioned, X-Men First Class, thought it was okay. I wasn't really a huge fan of it, but it was a decent film. I'm really hoping X-Men Apocalypse really brings something very special. We have Apocalypse, the biggest and most badass villain in the X-Men world, coming to fight them. Now, a lot of the things have been said online, and I'll repeat this here, and I think it's very funny, and it is true in a sense. Apocalypse is going to be fighting teenagers in the 80s. Honestly, in my personal opinion, if I was the one directing, writing, scripting out X-Men Apocalypse, the next one in the series, Apocalypse would be fighting the original cast. That's what I think. Just throwing this out there now, and so I can get it out of the way and talk about what the actual film is. In my perfect world, X-Men Apocalypse is the original cast, the older cast: James Marsden, Famke Janssen, Halle Berry, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Hugh Jackman, Anna Paquin, Daniel Cudmore, who plays Colossus, Shawn Ashmore as Iceman, Ellen Page, all of them returning to fight Apocalypse. That's what I would want to see, because they are veteran in their skills. They have grown up with their skills. They are used to their powers, and they know what to do with them. And they're gonna fight the most badass villain, and they're still gonna get their asses kicked, but they're gonna recover, and they're gonna defeat him. That's the point, showing that even though that the original cast and that they have aged and they have grown up and they understand their powers, they still can't defeat him the first round. They can't defeat him. honestly, if Apocalypse is as strong as he is in the comic books, and he's going to fight teenagers in the 80s, this looks terrible. This looks like it's going to kill. He's not going to kill anybody. Let's be honest. If he kills anybody, it's going to be people we don't see in the present. But if Apocalypse does not do massive damage in the 80s, and he doesn't literally put the younger cast, the teenagers, in their freaking last breath, and they barely pull out of it, I'll be very disappointed, because Apocalypse is supposed to be the dark god over them. He's supposed to be he is the first mutant. He cannot be defeated easily by teenagers. I'm sorry. I know some of them are not teenagers, but you see that with the casting of young Cyclops, young Jean Grey, young Storm, it just looks like it's going to be Apocalypse versus teenagers. And I'm so worried about that, because why are they introducing Apocalypse earlier? I mean, because here's what it is. And think about this, guys. We've already seen the outcome of the X-Men world. Technically, unless they do something afterwards, which I'll discuss later. Because X-Men Days of Future Past, that final scene where Hugh Jackman returns to the present, the school's fixed, everyone's fine, no one's dead. He brings back Cyclops, he brings back Jean Grey from the dead. Everything's fine. Everything is fine. So X-Men Apocalypse, in retrospect and reality, doesn't matter, because we know how it ends. Unless Apocalypse is not killed in X-Men Apocalypse, and he comes back after that scene, after the present, and it continues on, and then Apocalypse arises again. Then, okay, well then there was a reason to have that, to introduce Apocalypse, just to have him come back and fight the original cast. I'm all for it. X-Men Apocalypse 2, or X-Men Apocalypse, the Return of Apocalypse. Yeah, there you go. X-Men The Return of Apocalypse. That's the sequel. Happens after that scene where Hugh Jackman comes back into the present. Do that. That's what I want. But if that's not the case, and if that's not what happens, and nothing happens after X-Men Days of Future Past, nothing happens to where it needs to be made into a film, then X-Men Apocalypse does not need to happen, because it just proves everything gets fixed in the end. Because Apocalypse didn't kill everybody. So obviously everything's fine, right? That's my only gripe about it. There has to be a purpose why they're introducing Apocalypse in the 80s, in the timeline. If they, like I was saying, introduce Apocalypse after when Wolverine comes back into the present and everything's fine, that's different, because everything's all hunky-dory until Apocalypse comes and destroys everything. That's what I think they should do. But anyways, I keep rambling on about this. The casting: Ty Sheridan as young Cyclops, Sophie Turner as young Jean Grey, and we have Alexandra Shipp as young Storm. I'll be honest with you guys, even Sophie Turner, who apparently is a big part in Game of Thrones, I have not seen Game of Thrones. I have not seen the show. I know it's on HBO. I don't have HBO, so I can't watch the show. I'll be honest, I do not really know any of these three actors and the actor and two actresses' work. I don't know what stuff they've been in. I've checked. I actually looked at their Wikipedia, and on Ty Sheridan. I mean, I've not seen any of his films he's been a part of. The Tree of Life, Mud, Joe, Last Man Standing. He was on that's actually a show. I've actually seen Last Man Standing, but probably not that episode. The Forger, Dark Places, Last Day in the Desert, Grass Stains, Scouts vs. Zombies. I mean, I've just not seen any of that stuff he's been a part of. And Alexandra Shipp, Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel, Drumline, A New Beat, Aliyah, the Princess of R&B. I probably mispronounced that. Straight Outta Compton. She's in Straight Outta Compton, the NWA film. Okay. She's in television stuff. She's been in Victorious, House of Anubis, Oculate, Awkward, Ray Donovan, Days of Our Lives. Okay. No, Sophie Turner, let's see. Another Me, The 13th Tale, Barely Lethal, Alone, X-Men Apocalypse, Game of Thrones. I'm just not really familiar with a lot of these casting, and I understand they have to cast younger people because they're in the 80s, but, for me, I've said it before, and I'll repeat it here once again on this podcast. I've already said it before on the podcast, but I'm a huge fan of the original cast, and I really do think that Apocalypse needs to appear in the present timeline with the original cast. I think that's what they should do. And I understand this is a way for them to recreate the timeline, but we saw in the timeline that they end up being Famke Janssen, that James Marsden. We see where they end up being the original cast. So they can't continue on with these films and then have, 10 years down the road, then they finally get to this timeline, somewhere near the present, and then they're still playing the younger selves, but they haven't turned into the original cast. It makes no sense. I don't know what they're doing. I hope they have a plan. But yeah, so for me personally, I am excited for X-Men Apocalypse. Don't get me wrong. I am excited for the film. It's X-Men. But if this film leads into more spin-off films with the first class cast, and it spins off into having a young Jean Grey movie, a young Cyclops film, I'm going to be very disappointed, because the original cast needs that. Because X-Men 1, 2, and 3, in my personal opinion, were great films. X-Men 3, I understand, not that great. It's not as great as the first two. I'll admit that. X-Men 3 had a lot of issues. But it did introduce Kelsey Grammer as Beast, which I really liked. But I hope that X-Men Apocalypse is the ending of the trilogy. They've said it's the ending of the trilogy, and I hope that they focus on what's going to happen later with the original cast and all of that. But there you go. That's just my personal opinion on that. Now, Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse. He said some interesting things about his role as Apocalypse and what he can give away and what he's been saying, and it's interesting. He said that the one thing that really bothered me that he did say about it was that Apocalypse is going to have a human element. I don't personally like that. I do not like that one bit. Apocalypse is a mutant. He is the first mutant. We don't need to see human element. We don't need to see that. We don't need that. And actually, this little rant here about this reminds me of something else that was said. Now, I'm hoping that this doesn't turn out to be true. I'm hoping that this was just said and they've changed it. But before I get to that, I do not want to see Apocalypse, the human element of it. I don't want to, because Apocalypse is supposed to be the demon, the devil. He's supposed to be the guy that is the ruler of the world. That's what he wants to be. We don't need to see a human element of Apocalypse. We do not need to see that. And if you're a fan of that and you want to see that, fine. I'm not saying don't think that. I'm just saying I don't want it. I don't want that in X-Men Apocalypse. I want to see Apocalypse destroying cities. I want to see him killing mutants. I want to see it. I want to see him be the most badass villain, because if he does not do things that other villains have not done, and he basically does what all the other villains have done, not many things, and doesn't really affect the world like they should, he's going to be wasted. He's going to be a wasted villain. Now, at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, if he does not die, and they somehow put him to sleep, send him out into space, send him into a different time and space, I don't know, whatever, and they don't kill him, they got to bring him back and redeem it and prove that X-Men needs to fight the original cast. But anyways, let me get to the other part of the rant that I want to get to, which is that Mystique and Magneto and Beast, they're going to explore the relationships. Oh my god. Why do they have to do that? Why do they have to explore that? I just don't understand why they think that that's a good idea. Because we got to see a lot. We got to see some exploration in Days of Future Past with Mystique and Magneto, but we don't need to see that again. What really bothered me is that not only was that, but they said that Mystique and Magneto's relationship will be at the forefront of X-Men Apocalypse. I'm like, no, no, no. We don't need to see that. We don't need it. And whoever thinks that we need it needs to stop writing X-Men Apocalypse. Someone said it very clearly within AMC Movie Talk. I can't remember who exactly said. AMC Movie Talk is a great YouTube channel to check out movie news and hearing people discuss different topics of the movie world and give their opinions. It's a great YouTube channel. Go check it out if you've not checked out AMC Movie Talk and all that. But someone on that program, whenever this is brought up, when this news was brought up about Mystique and Magneto's relationship is going to be the forefront, They said, no, we don't need that. And you want, no, Christian Harloff, I believe, from the Schmoes No actually said this. He basically, I think he said that the reason why he liked X-Men Days of Future Past so much was because there was no elements of love. There was a little bit with Magneto and Mystique. There was a little bit, where Magneto was trying to chase her and trying to find her, and they almost kissed, and there was like that little romantic moment for like a little bit, and of course she left. But it's plain and simple, and I agree with that statement. The reason why Days of Future Past was so great because a love interest and a love element was nowhere to be found in that film, just for a brief second. But you're so focused on the drama and the action within the film that stuff was put to the side and you really didn't notice it. But I swear, if in the middle of X-Men Apocalypse we have a 5 to 10 minute scene about the love between Magneto and Mystique or Mystique and Beast, I'm going to lose it. Because we don't need that in these films. Especially in X-Men Apocalypse, when the guy is going to be destroying cities, I hope. We don't need a love scene in the film. We don't need that. We need some dramatic elements like Days of Future Past, where Apocalypse is destroying cities. They can't stop him. They're trying to figure out what's his weakness, what can they do, and introducing, of course, young Jean Grey and young Storm and young Cyclops. They don't need to be spending time on relationship crap we don't care about. Because honestly, if they do it, and they show a scene, blah, 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 are they going to do a spinoff with Mystique and Magneto? I hope they don't. Because we don't need that. This is X-Men Apocalypse, not X-Men Apocalypse and also love interest with Mystique and Magneto and also Beast. We don't need that. We need X-Men Apocalypse. That's what we need. That's what we need to get. And I'm hoping we get it. I'm hoping we do. Anyways, I'm going to end this podcast talking about what I would like to see the future of the X-Men world and what I would like to see. Of course, we also, within this X-Men universe, we have Deadpool before X-Men Apocalypse coming out, which looks to be really good. Daniel Cudmore, as I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. I'm probably wrong, but Daniel Cudmore could be reprising as a Colossus. I really hope that happens. Great guy. I'm hoping that does happen. Also continuing on, will be, of course, the Gambit solo film with Channing Tatum. That's interesting. I'm not really sure how that would, where in the timeline it's going to be. The Gambit film could be set in the 80s near Apocalypse, and Channing Tatum could appear in the Apocalypse film before a solo film as Gambit, of course. But who knows? A lot of people have been saying, and I stand behind this, is that the Gambit film needs to have Anna Paquin. I believe that's how to pronounce her last name, but, anyways, Rogue needs to appear within Gambit. So if it's set in the present timeline and Gambit has his own solo film in the present timeline, we need to have Rogue somewhere in that film. That'd be really cool. Maybe Iceman, who knows? Just somebody else. I mean, if I had a dream, which I have a lot of dreams, Gambit's film would have Rogue, and I think that just because, just for the sake of it, we also probably need to have Iceman. I think that'd be cool. You having Iceman, Rogue, and Gambit in a film together. I mean, that would be interesting. I mean, Rogue has, a relationship with Iceman. So having Gambit in there would be kind of cool to see them, basically go and do an adventure, or having some original cast pop up in the film if it's set in the present timeline. Now, if it's set in the 80s, we can't have Rogue because Rogue is, of course, going to be, I don't think she wouldn't even be born in the 80s. I don't know how old Rogue is in the X-Men universe. But, that's just me. Now, to the actual stuff we don't know. Past Wolverine 3, all that. There is a 2018 release date for an X-Men film that is yet to be titled. What I would like that to be is an X-Men original cast sequel, which I've been tweeting about a lot. I have a Twitter account actually dedicated to it, because I love the X-Men original cast so much. But I'm hoping 2018 would be an X-Men original cast film, with the cast coming back, because if we get Ian McKellen returning as old Magneto in Apocalypse, and we get Patrick Stewart, Professor X, returning as, returning in Wolverine 3, and it's all set, Wolverine 3 is set after the events of, after the present scene at the end of Days of Future Past when Wolverine fixed everything. They could end up having another X-Men original cast sequel film with it's like X-Men 3 to X-Men 4. It's be X-Men 4 really, and the villain I would like them to introduce. I don't think they're going to do it, but It'd be cool because, I mentioned Omega Red could pop up in Wolverine 3. I would like to see Mr. Sinister in X-Men Original Cast sequel in 2018. I would like that to happen. I would like to see Mr. Sinister, another amazing villain that needs to have a film rendition of. We need to see him on the screen. We need to see Mr. Sinister. He is sinister. It's in his name. He is a very interesting villain, and I think that they could pull that off. I really think they could because the X-Men has had a lot of films, and a lot of the times the villain ends up being the same villain. Magneto, unfortunately. X-Men 1, 2, and 3 was really just Magneto. And X-Men 2, understand, was William Stryker, but Magneto also turned out to be a sub-villain, so he was always there. Now, Days of Future Past, the older Ian McKellen, I almost said Professor X, the older Magneto was not a villain, but the younger Magneto ended up being, Michael Fassbender ended up being a villain in the film, turning on everybody, essentially. Basically to save the mutants, but he was going at it in a very negative way. So I think that they really need to introduce these really iconic villains. I mean, they're doing Apocalypse, I get it, but they have to do more than that. I mean, if they just do Apocalypse and they end up using Sabretooth again or something, or they end up using Juggernaut or something, the villains we've already seen a film adaptation of. We need to see villains they have never attempted. We're getting Apocalypse, continue with that type of idea. Wolverine 3. Omega Red, perfect. That's great. They did the Silver Samurai in the Wolverine, so do Omega Red, and then original cast sequel, the X-Men 2018. Let it be Mr. Sinister. That'd be very, very cool. But that's basically all I have about it. I think that it would just there's no telling what's going to happen. But I mean, I know ever since the Marvel Cinematic Universe was so successful that DC is following that format. Fox is now following that format, and I like that. I like that the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Marvel Studios, basically showed these other studios that have all these comic book characters that you can do this, that this can be done, and that it should be done. Do it. See how cool it is. See how people will respond to it. I think so far people are responding great to it because people knew X-Men First Class. It was attached to the X-Men 1, 2, 3 films and all that. It was attached to the other films. But Days of Future Past really connected it because now they're in the same film. They're not, now of course, the only two people that really meet is the young professor and the old professor within, Wolverine's mind. But it still happened. It still happened in the film. So I think this is a really good idea to do this. Also, I guess I'll just also throw this in at the end. Solo films. I think they should do some solo films, but not solo films in the past. They should do solo films in the present and having these characters, do their own thing. We've seen Wolverine has solo film. I would personally like to see a Storm film with Halle Berry. I mean, that's just me. People might say, well, the new girl that's playing Storm, solo film. If they do that, I'm not going to be interested in it. But if they did a solo film for Storm and we get to see, maybe some flashbacks of her childhood and then having her, go through a thing, basically a situation in the Storm film and have it for a reason, not just to do it with Halle Berry, I'd be happy for that. I'd like to see that. What I would like to see, also, to build on his character where he is now, James Marsden as a Cyclops. The older Cyclops, the original Cyclops, needs a solo film. It would be great. I think it'd be awesome. But who knows what would happen with that. But that's just my personal opinion. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of the topics I discussed today with the future of the X-Men universe, what I would like to see in future X-Men stuff. Also talking about the X-Men Apocalypse casting and my thoughts on what's been talked about, basically rumors and all that stuff about the film. And also, what do you think of the Wolverine 3 rumors with Patrick Stewart coming into the film as Professor X? Anyways, guys, I hope to see your comments and hear what you guys think about all that. Anyways, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. I'll see you guys next Saturday with episode number 3. Bye.